atmosphere, no day in June.
In Hollywood, the most perfect screen kisses were sometimes wrapped in carefully crafted image protection contracts. Sophisticated gentlemen like Paul Newman and Rock Hudson were the ultimate icons of masculinity. But behind the doors of their villas lay a series of conflicted choices torn between public expectations and the call of their true selves. We will explore the lives of talented women who dedicated their youth to building a home, unaware of the hidden, private worlds of the husbands beside them. From Phyllis Gates and her silent search for answers to Betsy Drake, and her longing to understand the soul of a man who never quite belonged to her. Join us as we step back in time to hear the stories of 7 unique marriages where truth and private secrets intertwined. Every legend has a story worth sharing. Please subscribe to join us on our next journey into the depths of cinema history. 1. Angela Lansbury and Richard Cromwell. The note on the dressing table. The neon lights of 1940s Hollywood did more than illuminate breathtaking beauties. They cast long shadows over a world of professionalized deception. In an era where reputation was measured by the yardstick of hypocritical morality, the marriage between a 19-year-old Angela Lansbury and actor Richard Cromwell became a tragic opening chapter for the beard wives of the film capital. This wasn't just a story of a breakup. It was a testament to a studio system willing to crush a young girl's heart to protect its most valuable asset, the heterosexual matinee idol image. Angela Lansbury walked down the aisle in 1945 with the heart of a first-time lover brimming with trust and admiration. Richard Cromwell was then a 34-year-old gentleman possessing a dapper charm and a solidified status in the industry. To a young Angela, Richard was the embodiment of perfection. Little did she know that behind his polished smile was a tactical plan from the movie moguls. Rumors of Richard's preference for men had begun to simmer among the insiders. To extinguish the fire that could incinerate a rising star's career, a lavender marriage was staged, and Angela was the perfect pawn, young innocent, and entirely unsuspecting. Their married life passed in an unsettling silence. While Angela devoted herself to the home, Richard grew increasingly reclusive and melancholic. She often wondered why her husband avoided intimacy, and why his gaze always seemed fixed on some dark, distant place. The innocence of the 1940s prevented her from realizing she was living with a man undergoing profound internal torment while playing the role of a straight husband every day. Richard was no villain. He was a human being, trapped between his true self and survival in a society that refused to accept him. 9 months after the wedding, the shimmering velvet curtain finally collapsed in the cruelest way. Returning home after a day's work, Angela found the house eerily still. There was no welcoming embrace, no warm dinner, only a small slip of paper placed neatly on the dressing table. The handwriting was jagged, cutting like a knife. "I'm sorry I can't go on, I'm gay." Richard left that very afternoon without a single conversation or a word of face-to-face explanation, leaving his teenage bride bewildered amidst the shards of a dream that had barely begun. In a rare 2017 interview with the Daily Mail, the legendary Angela Lansbury recalled that moment with haunting composure, yet she couldn't hide the lingering pain of the past. She admitted that back then she didn't even grasp what the concept of being gay meant. In the mind of a 19-year-old girl, she believed she had failed as a wife, that her beauty or personality was so fundamentally flawed, it drove her husband to flee. The truth of that note dealt a fatal blow to Angela's self-esteem, taking her many years to heal those psychological scars and stop the cycle of self-blame. The most striking element of this story is the intervention of Hollywood's cleanup crew. Posthumous documents revealed that this marriage was essentially an unwritten contract where Angela was reduced to a decorative accessory for Richard's masculinity. Richard Cromwell had attempted to cure himself through marriage, but the note on the dressing table was his belated confession. No union could ever alter one's natural orientation. He chose a cruel exit to liberate them both before the web of lies completely consumed their souls. Despite starting with such profound deception, Angela Lansbury displayed an astonishing level of grace. She never used this story to smear Richard in the press or play the victim for sympathy. Instead, she maintained a deep friendship with him until his death from cancer in 1960. Angela saw Richard as a soulmate who had lost his way, a victim of a harsh era rather than a fraud. She understood that in the golden cage of Hollywood lies were sometimes the only currency for a moment of public peace. Angela Lansbury's story opens this list as a chilling wake-up call regarding the price of fame. It proves that even as a rising star, you can still be a pawn in the hands of the industry's puppet masters. That note was more than just the end of a mistaken marriage. It was the birth of a legend, a woman who learned to see through the masks of the film capital to live more authentically than ever before. It remains a somber memory, a raw truth, and an essential part of the grit that built the great Angela Lansbury we know today. The quiet heartbreak of Angela Lansbury was merely the prelude to a far more brutal reality, one where sexual secrets weren't just left on paper, but were stripped bare through breathless investigations. This brings us to the high-stakes confrontation between the god of masculinity, Rock Hudson, and his wife Phyllis Gates. 2. Phyllis Gates and Rock Hudson. The War of the Wiretaps and the Scam of the Century.
Very epitome of a true movie star.
In the golden history of Hollywood rock, Hudson was more than just an actor. He was a religion of manliness. With his towering height, chiseled features, and baritone voice, Rock was a magnet for women worldwide. Yet behind that radiant facade was a massive brainwashing and staging campaign by Universal Pictures. To hide a truth that could destroy an entire empire, Rock Hudson was gay. And Phyllis Gates, a young, beautiful secretary, was the woman chosen to play the wife in the most expensive marriage contract in cinematic history. The events leading to this union were born not of love, but of blackmail. In 1955, the tabloid Confidential, the terror of every star, held undeniable evidence of Rock's private life and threatened to go public. Facing the loss of their golden goose, Henry Wilson, Rock's powerful and predatory manager, quickly arranged a whirlwind wedding with his own secretary. The marriage took place after only a few weeks of superficial dating, a perfect script written to kill all public suspicion. Phyllis entered this marriage with absolute faith in love, unaware she was becoming a cog in a giant propaganda machine. However, the sweetness of the honeymoon was soon replaced by creeping doubt. Rock was frequently absent at night, cold during private moments, and maintained unusually close male friendships. A woman's intuition told Phyllis that something was deeply wrong within her own home. Refusing to suffer in silence like many women of her time, Phyllis made a daring, detective-like decision. She contacted Fred Otash, a famous Hollywood private investigator known for handling the dark secrets behind the curtain. Under Otash's guidance, Phyllis secretly installed recording devices in the bedroom and on the phone. She needed confirmation, a raw truth, to end the mental agony. These secret tapes, only publicly revealed after Phyllis's death in 2006, exposed a harrowing confrontation. In a shocking 1958 recording, Phyllis directly confronted Rock about his night with a man in Rome. Instead of denying it or apologizing, Rock Hudson replied in a cold, detached tone, "That's the way I live, and you knew that when you signed the marriage papers." This wasn't just a confession of his sexuality. It was a bucket of ice water thrown at Phyllis's heart, confirming she was merely a tool in a studio contract. The depth of Phyllis's tragedy lay in the fact that she was betrayed not just by a husband, but by an entire industry. When she tried to divorce and seek the truth, studio bosses exerted massive pressure to keep the case from the tabloids. They painted her as a gold digger or a pathologically jealous wife to protect Rock's image. Phyllis was trapped between the husband she once loved and the giants controlling the fate of Hollywood. The marriage ended in 1958 after 3 bitter years. Phyllis received a small settlement and absolute silence from the media. For decades, she lived in the shadow of suspicion, while the public still believed she was the happy wife of the gentleman, Rock Hudson, until his death from AIDS in 1985. Only then, when Rock became the first major celebrity to go public with the disease of the century, did the world begin to realize the pain Phyllis had endured alone. Phyllis Gates's story is a haunting warning of the cruelty of manufactured glamour. She was not a woman who knew nothing. She was a woman who dared to find the truth and paid for it with her youth and her dignity. Her secret tapes are more than just proof of an actor's sexuality. They are a stinging indictment of an era where fame was built upon the ruins of deceived women's souls. The dramatic confrontation of Phyllis Gates stripped bare the staging machinery of the major studios. But in another corner of Hollywood, there were wives who chose an entirely different path, a silent pact of deep empathy that spanned over 3 decades. This brings us to the extraordinary story of Elsa Lanchester and Charles Laughton. 3. Elsa Lanchester and Charles Laughton, The Shadow Pact and 33 Years of Kinship.
Dignity. I hope, however, this will not deflect.
If Rock Hudson's marriage was a large-scale fraud directed by the studio, then the story of Elsa Lanchester and Charles Laughton was a strange chapter that defied all conventional Hollywood moral standards. This is not the story of a victim deceived until the very end, but of a woman who chose to face the truth with astonishing composure, ultimately transforming a broken marriage into the most enduring alliance in the film capital. Elsa Lanchester, who forever entered history with her iconic role in Bride of Frankenstein, married the master actor Charles Laughton in 1929. Both were true artists possessing sharp intellects and somewhat eccentric souls. They found in each other an intellectual synergy rarely seen in any couple. However, just 2 years after their wedding, the velvet curtain of romance was torn away by a stark reality. Elsa did not discover her husband's secret through rumors or letters. She caught Charles in the act with a young man right on the sofa in their own living room. That moment, as Elsa recalled in her autobiography, Elsa Lanchester herself, permanently altered the structure of her life. Instead of screaming, filing for divorce, or creating a scandal that would rock the press, Elsa chose a reaction that would later make insiders tip their hats. She stayed silent. Elsa's silence did not stem from weakness or blindness, but from a shadow pact. She understood that Charles Laughton was a creative genius, a man with a sensitive soul imprisoned in a body, and an era that did not accept his true identity. From that moment on, their marriage shifted into a state that film historians call a comrade contract. They decided never to have children and ceased all sexual relations entirely. Instead, Elsa became Charles's protector manager and greatest soulmate. She played the role of the perfect beard, before the public helping Charles maintain his image as a refined gentleman of the dramatic arts, while behind the scenes, she quietly handled the complications arising from his secret sexual life. Profound and little-known information reveals that Elsa repeatedly stood up to blackmailers, those who had discovered Charles's sexuality and threatened to ruin him. In an era where homosexuality could lead to imprisonment, Elsa was the strongest shield protecting her husband's freedom. She protected not only his reputation, but also his male lovers from police crackdowns. In return, Charles gave Elsa absolute respect and unconditional support in her career. Together, they created classic works and shared evenings debating art and philosophy in their common home, where love was defined by empathy rather than instinct. The depth of this story lies in the quiet sacrifice of Elsa Lanchester. She accepted the setting aside of her personal need for a complete romantic love to nurture a strange but enduring relationship for 33 years. In the biography, Charles Laughton, a difficult actor. The authors pointed out that Charles lived in a constant state of guilt toward his wife, and it was that very guilt that drove him to give his all to art as a way of seeking redemption. Elsa knew everything. She saw through her husband's pain of living in the shadows, and she chose to be the only light that allowed him to be himself in their private space. Their marriage lasted until Charles passed away from cancer in 1962. For 33 years, the world looked at them as a model couple of intellect and stability. Only after Charles was laid to rest did Elsa begin to reveal bit by bit the truth behind her non-sexual marriage. She did not recount it with a tone of resentment, but with the pride of one who had triumphed over the cruel prejudices of the era. Elsa proved that in Hollywood the truth sometimes does not lie in what people see on the screen, but in the silent agreements made in the dark. The story of Elsa Lanchester and Charles Laughton is a distinct note in the symphony of lavender marriage tragedies. It poses a painful question to the audience: is a love without sex, built on an initial deception, but ending in absolute loyalty, worth more than an ordinary heterosexual marriage? Elsa chose the most difficult path, and she became the most powerful woman in a way no one expected. Holding the key to a secret that could topple a monument, yet choosing to use it to protect that monument until her very last breath. The compassion and the pact of Elsa Lanchester created a peaceful fortress for Charles Laughton, but not every wife possessed such composure when facing invisible barriers. At another extreme, there was a woman who had to resort to the most radical psychological therapies, even psychedelics, to try and unlock the soul of a perfect but mysterious gentleman. This brings us to the story of Betsy Drake and Cary Grant. 4. Betsy Drake and Cary Grant, Hypnosis and the Ego at the Abyss.
I know her. It's better I know.
Cary Grant's presence on screen was the embodiment of a perfection so unrealistic, it seemed otherworldly, from that mesmerizing smirk to the poise of a gentleman who never made a mistake. Yet at Bachelor Hall, the mansion where he lived for 12 years alongside actor Randolph Scott, that perfection seemed to fracture. Candid photos of the two men in domestic attire surfaced, sparking endless questions about a suppressed same-sex love. When Betsy Drake entered Cary's life as his third wife in 1949, she believed she could use love to understand the man the world idolized, unaware she was trying to open a door that had long been locked from the inside. Betsy's pain did not stem from overt abuse or betrayal, but from an invisible distance, an emotional barrier that made her feel like a stranger in her own marriage. Refusing to accept this silence, Betsy Drake made a decision far ahead of her time, and fraught with danger, she drew Cary into therapy sessions involving LSD, psychedelics, and hypnosis. This is an incredibly provocative detail that few knew of in the 1950s. She hoped these substances would shatter Cary's defensive walls, helping him face his fears about his true identity and the secrets buried beneath a superstar's aura. During prolonged drug-induced states, Cary Grant fell into panics and admitted to raw truths. According to the documentary Becoming Cary Grant 2017, he confessed he had spent his entire life playing Cary Grant, a character he created to please the public, while his true self remained a lonely child riddled with gender conflicts and a desperate craving for acceptance. Betsy Drake witnessed that collapse. She saw a shattered Cary Grant, a man who could not love her fully because he was too busy fighting his own ghosts. The marriage ended in 1962 with a gentlemanly silence. Betsy Drake left with a broken heart, but one filled with empathy. She realized that no therapy or love could heal a soul so tightly framed by Hollywood. Their story stands as an indictment of the cruelty of the heterosexual matinee idol image, where a woman had to resort to the most extreme methods just to catch a fleeting glimpse of the real man behind her husband's mask. Betsy Drake's helplessness before Cary Grant's psychological walls was only half of the tragic picture. In another dark corner of Hollywood, there was a woman who not only faced distance, but had to witness a cruel repetition of fate within her own home. This leads us into the world haunted by the past ghosts of Dorothy herself, Judy Garland, and her marriage to director Vincente Minnelli. 5. Judy Garland and Vincente Minnelli, The Tragic Loop Beyond the Rainbow. Judy Garland's destiny seemed written by a script full of irony, where she spent her life searching for a true love, only to fall into the exact same trap her father had left behind. The marriage between the Dorothy of Oz and the gifted director Vincente Minnelli began with artistic admiration. but it quickly spiraled into a psychological nightmare as Judy began to notice familiar signs regarding her husband's sexuality signs that had once driven her father out of town years earlier. Vincente was a creative genius, but he was also a man living two lives, an openly gay Vincente in New York and a model husband Vincente under the bright lights of MGM Studios. The tragedy reached its breaking point one fateful night at their villa when Judy Garland accidentally witnessed Vincente in the arms of another man. This event was not merely an affair. For a soul as sensitive and wounded as Judy's, it was confirmation that she had once again been abandoned by the very men she trusted most. According to the biography, Vincente Minnelli, Hollywood's dark dreamer, following this shock, Judy fell into an extreme state of panic and attempted suicide by slitting her wrists in the bathroom. She felt she had been turned into a decoration for Vincente's reputation, a tool to cover up a truth Hollywood considered a stain. The most heartbreaking truth unearthed by film historians is that Judy lived in constant obsession over not being attractive enough for her husband. She didn't understand that the issue lay not in her appeal, but in Vincente's gender identity, something he absolutely could not change amidst the rigid studio era. This marriage pushed Judy's addiction to sedatives and alcohol to uncontrollable levels, turning the most brilliant years of her career into a desperate struggle for survival. In 1951, the marriage collapsed, leaving Judy Garland more shattered than ever. Vincente Minnelli kept his secrets until the end of his life to protect his illustrious directing career, while Judy continued to wander beyond the rainbow with psychological scars that would never heal. Their story bears witness to the brutality of the old star system, where women like Judy Garland were forced into the role of the ideal wife, solely to serve the deception of an era that did not allow humans to live truthfully. The truths about Judy Garland and Cary Grant exposed the cracks in the glamour, but there remains an eternal icon, a 50-year marriage considered solid gold, yet harboring secrets that have never been officially confirmed. We now turn to person. Number 6, Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward, the epicenter of curiosity for all time. 6. Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward, Behind the Blue Eyes and the Secret of the Golden Marriage.
Conversation.
Well,
they were a Hollywood.
Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward have long been regarded as the gold standard of fidelity in Hollywood. In a world where divorces occur as fast as a slow-motion film, their 50-year romance seemed like a miracle in the heart of a cinema capital rife with deception. Paul's classic quip, "Why go out for a hamburger when you have steak at home?" became a manifesto for absolute loyalty. Yet that flawless portrait began to show haunting cracks when biographers delved into unpublished shadows where history's most captivating blue eyes seemed to harbor desires beyond the confines of a traditional heterosexual marriage. The mystery truly ignited with Darwin Porter's shocking biography, Paul Newman, the man behind the baby blues. According to backstage sources and declassified documents, Newman wasn't quite the simple steak gentleman the public was promised. The book depicts a man carrying a complex bisexual identity, one who allegedly maintained secret relationships with other legendary actors, most notably Anthony Perkins, the star of Psycho, who appeared as a ghost throughout Newman's life. Handwritten letters and clandestine meetings at luxury hotels under aliases created a web of suspicion that audiences still debate today. Joanne Woodward, a brilliant, sharp woman and an Oscar winner, was certainly no naive wife. The narrative depth of this marriage lies in her choice. Instead of playing the victim or the deceived spouse, Joanne seemingly chose a more powerful role, the keeper of secrets. Those close to the family noted that Joanne understood her husband's magnetic pull toward both genders perfectly. Rather than controlling him or sparking scandals, she created a limited freedom, a profound empathy that allowed Paul to maintain his masculine icon status while soothing his internal conflicts regarding his identity. The depth of this story also lies in the ambiguous relationship between Paul Newman and Marlon Brando. Rumors that these two premier Hollywood titans shared moments beyond colleagues sent the press of that era into a frenzy, yet all were suppressed by the sheer power of the studios and Joanne's absolute silence. Many film historians believe that Joanne Woodward's tolerance and acceptance were the true keys that allowed their marriage to endure for half a century. She didn't love the image of Paul Newman on the screen. She loved the real man riddled with the contradictions within him. Information regarding Paul Newman's frequent turn to alcohol as a way to relieve psychological pressure is also closely linked to these sexual mysteries. Living under the mask of the perfect husband for 50 years while harboring different desires was a staggering burden. Posthumous records reveal that Paul underwent severe identity crises, and it was Joanne who pulled him back from the abyss. Their fidelity viewed from another perspective was not an absence of temptation, but a choice to stay together despite the implicit truths they both understood, but never publicized. Until Paul's passing in 2008, the secrets of his sexuality remained confined to rumors and biographers' hypotheses. However, these doubts do not diminish the greatness of the Newman-Woodward romance. On the contrary, they make their story more grounded and humane. It proves that even the most perfect marriages have dark corners, and sometimes the greatest love is not one without secrets, but one large enough to encompass the most complex facets of a partner. The story of Paul Newman's Blue Eyes closes a chapter on doubt and tolerance, but it opens the door to the most tragic conclusion on this list. This is where another woman witnessed the man she loved fade away from a disease that the world then called a death sentence for secrets, leading us to the heartbreaking tale of Anthony Perkins and Barry Berenson. 7. Barry Berenson and Anthony Perkins, Vows in the Dark and the Ultimate Sacrifice.
Magazine?
Yeah, was it one of those things?
The name Anthony Perkins will forever be linked to the haunting gaze of Norman Bates in the masterpiece Psycho. But in reality, the actor was besieged by a fear more terrifying than any horror film, the fear of being cast out by society for his true identity. Amidst a 1970s Hollywood still rife with prejudice, his marriage to photographer Barry Berenson appeared as a peaceful oasis, a beautiful love story masking the turbulent waves of repression and the extreme conversion therapies Perkins endured before daring to walk down the aisle. The truth of Anthony Perkins' life was a long string of desperate attempts to become normal. Before meeting Barry, Perkins lived in the shadows of discreet same-sex affairs with stars like Tab Hunter and dancer Rudolf Nureyev. According to the biography Anthony Perkins' Split Image, he underwent controversial treatments including electroshock therapy and hypnosis in the sole hope of curing his orientation. When he met Barry in 1973, he saw her as a final chance at a model family life, an escape from the harassed ghosts of his youth. Barry Berenson, a free-spirited photographer, entered Perkins' life with pure love and unconditional admiration. She was no deceived wife. Those close to them believe she was well aware of his conflicted past. Yet she chose to believe in the power of love and home. They married and had 2 sons, creating a perfect shield against the media. For nearly 2 decades, Barry stood firmly by Perkins, helping him maintain his image as a family man, while quietly accepting the private corners of his life he could never fully abandon. Tragedy truly struck in the 1980s as the AIDS pandemic swept the world. Perkins discovered his diagnosis accidentally through a tabloid that stole his blood test results. Instead of publicizing the truth, the couple made a harrowing choice to guard this secret at all costs to protect their children and the father's legacy. In his final 2 years, Perkins fought the disease in silence, while Barry acted as his sole confidant, helping him perform his final role before the world. The depth of this sacrifice was proven by their joint lie claiming he suffered from lung cancer. Until his final breath in 1992, the world remained ignorant of the truth. In his posthumous farewell letter, Perkins wrote, "I have learned more about love from this woman than I could have in any of the secret worlds I have ever lived in." This was not just an admission of his identity, but a tribute to Barry's monumental grace, a woman who lived a massive lie just to save the soul of the man she loved. The end of this story bears a fate more cruel than any fiction. 9 years after her husband passed, Barry Berenson perished in the September 11th attacks while aboard American Airlines Flight 11, the first plane to strike the Twin Towers. Her sudden passing closed a somber chapter of sacrifice. She took Perkins' deepest secrets to the grave, leaving a powerful message of loyalty that transcended the limits of gender and conventional morality. The story of Barry and Anthony Perkins is the most somber note to close this list. It shows that sometimes the truth is not the most important thing, but rather how we choose to love and protect one another against a harsh world. Barry Berenson was not a victim. She was a woman who actively chose to embrace her husband's pain, turning a lavender marriage into an epic of love and empathy until her very last breath. The diaries are closed and the secret tapes are gathering dust, but the stories of the women behind Hollywood's velvet curtain remain a haunting silence. We call them Beard Wives, but perhaps their true title is Protectors. Those who stood in the shadows to guard the reputations, careers, and lives of the men they loved against a judgmental era. The aura of Paul Newman, Cary Grant, or Rock Hudson was built not just by their talent, but by the painful silence of women like Joanne Woodward and Phyllis Gates. They loved, they sacrificed, and they chose to understand even when the truth cut like a knife. Ultimately, Hollywood owes them an apology, and we owe them a more compassionate gaze at the loves that could never be lived in the light. The truth is rarely as dazzling as the stage lights, but it is what gives depth to legends. If these stories have changed your perspective on the entertainment world, please leave a like and a comment sharing which figure moved you the most. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications as we continue to unmask the shocking shadows of history and cultural icons. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. Goodbye, and see you in the next discovery.